There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special Chapter 5 in our NFL preview. Today, we're talking about the sensuous, sumptuous world of tight ends, a very fertile breeding ground to discuss fantasy football. I'm Chris Spags, joined by my good pal, my compatriot in this NFL breakdown process, the chubster, tout boy, Josh Engelman. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm great. Nothing I like talking about more than tight ends. Is this a football stream?
Yeah. No, we're just football talk. We're going to do the most important position in football, the tight end. I do think the tight end is often undervalued in the fantasy industry in particular, but also as an important part of the football lineup. You know, they block, they catch, they sometimes have to do both equally well to have a team that succeeds. So this is like football for juveniles is what we're doing right now. But look, I like the tight end. You may not.
I like it when it's one of the three guys that have a pulse. Otherwise, I can take it or leave it.
I think there are a lot more guys out there that we're going to unearth today who have a lot of value, who could be interesting for your season long, for your DFS plays. But we'll get to them as we go. Here's one who's probably not. We'll start with the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to go A through Z as we always do. I guess there really isn't a Z NFL team, but we're going to start with A. The Cardinals, their relevant tight end is Ricky Seals-Jones. He had flashes in 2017, most notably 11.4 air yards per target. That mark would have him fifth in the league amongst tight ends with more than 10 targets. His 43% catch rate, though, is not good. His red zone targets also kind of stink given how athletic he is and how big he is. He may have moments of usefulness, particularly against defenses that let him get downfield. But unfortunately, Ricky Seals-Jones, I don't see a breakout from. I am going to sell Mr. Seals-Jones.
Yeah, Ricky Seals-Jones, 46th in DVOA among tight ends last year. Gresham behind him was 37th. Neither guy going in any sort of like reasonable spot to be drafted. So these are guys that you would pick up off the scrap heap if you needed to stream a tight end. And in DFS, I mean, it's going to be very dependent on a very particular matchup for either of those two guys to be even remotely close to viable. So yeah, I guess I'm selling both of them in that I wouldn't want to buy them. I would go to a different store.
I agree. The one thing I will say is that there are positive notes from Sam Bradford so far in camp. Obviously, every quarterback tends to have a lot of positive notes, but Bradford has been apparently in good command of the offense. Bradford does love his tight ends, so maybe something there. But yeah, it's something you can get off of waivers or for $3,000 in a week or two. So yeah, no Seals-Jones, no kiss from a rose on the grave for you, Mr. Seals.
That's terrible. Seals-Jones, 23rd tight end coming off the board, average draft position. So yeah, pass.
Iffy. The Atlanta Falcons up next. Their relevant tight end is Austin Hooper. In the article companion, which you'll be able to see shortly after this video is done, Peter King gave a really interesting quote about Austin Hooper basically suckling at the teat of Matt Ryan, moving next door to him while Matt Ryan had new kids. So he would just be around all the time for Matt Ryan to throw the ball for him. Apparently, this is the same thing Julian Edelman did to force feed himself to Tom Brady a few years ago. And Hooper was already good on its own before he started brown-nosing Matt Ryan to get the ball more. He was 16th in the league last year with target share, 12.3%. But his 75.4% catch rate was actually the best among starting tight ends getting actual opportunity. Hooper, I think, is a guy who's going to make a jump into the top 10 this year, maybe even the top 5. I like Hooper a lot, and I'm buying.
Top 5, Jesus. Austin Hooper, 23rd in DVOA among tight ends last year. I think he's fully functional, but average draft position right now, 28th among tight ends. He's just not going to get the red zone targets that you would want. I mean, it's hard to focus on him when you have guys like Julio Jones, Sanu, potentially Calvin Ridley now moving forward. So I don't think there's really anything to buy for Hooper outside, again, of streaming. I'd like him. I guess I sort of like him in games where I would have Matt Ryan as my quarterback. I would be fine to have like a Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Austin Hooper stack. But otherwise, I mean, he's not ownable in a season-long format.
I think he can. I mean, he's getting 4 targets a game right now. I mean, obviously expecting a 50% jump seems a little high, but if he got to like 6 targets, he would be amongst the top targeted tight ends out there. And again, the catch rate's really what I'm looking for. He's converting opportunities. Obviously, more offseason work with Ryan is going to result in more opportunity for him. I'm with you on the red zone thing, but they were also just terrible overall in the red zone last year. And I think getting Jones more involved in the red zone more effectively will help Hooper in a lot of ways. He's a young player. Like, I think that's also part of it too. He's 23 years old. I think this is around the time guys make that jump. So he's a guy who I think has upside to get there. I'm with you though. Like, I'm saying like top 5 is like his ceiling. In the best possible world where everything breaks his way. But I think him going 28th, that's very low for a guy like Hooper.
3 touchdowns last year? I don't see the reason that it goes up in any sort of appreciable fashion. So, yeah, it's just he's like the how many down the line option for Matt Ryan. I'll pass. If you want him, you can have him. You can pick him up for free at the end of your draft if you'd like him.
He broke an 88-yard touchdown last year, which at tight end that would actually be the longest play I think by a tight end last year, at least one of them.
Okay, so you should only have 2 touchdowns, and he got shit lucky for one of them.
No, but I mean that's breakaway speed for a tight end. I think that's noteworthy. Look,
what if the dude fell down? We have no idea if he like outran somebody.
I remember that play. He was running. He was hustling. He's a big body. He was hustling. Look, Austin Hooper. I'm buying Austin Hooper.
Justin Bauer traded to the Phillies.
Oh, Justin Bauer is engaged to a friend of a girl I know who's apparently like a real bitch.
Or I guess Justin Bohr. I don't know why I said Bauer.
Bohr, yeah, it's Bohr. He's a bore. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that later. This is not the live stream for that, but we'll talk about that, I'm sure, on the live.
Kind of interesting.
It is. The Phillies really loading up, even on post-trade deadline, guys. It's an interesting little thing for them. Anyway, Austin Hooper, big buy. Baltimore Ravens, the relevant tight ends are Hayden Hurst, Nick Boyle, and Max Williams. Hayden Hurst, though, is really the one to watch here. Nick Boyle and Max Williams were really bad in their limited opportunities last year. Hurst is a rookie. Hurst is a big body who has a lot of hype going behind him. Again, no nothing to reference here because he is a rookie. But to me, Hayden Hurst would be the one to want. And again, if you're going with Hurst, you're banking a lot on Joe Flacco being living up to the hype of the preseason reviews so far, in which people are saying he's throwing the ball better than he ever has, having the best camp he's had. So I don't mind Hayden Hurst, but I don't think you need to draft him or anything. I think you can get him for cheap later on. But he is a guy who I would watch and keep an eye on as preseason develops as maybe having some value. So a hold for me on the Ravens, and in particular Hayden Hurst.
Hayden Hurst being drafted ahead of every single person that we've talked about so far. Obviously,
that's crazy.
Don't have a ton to talk about. Tight end wasn't exactly something that the Ravens were using a lot last year. That could be a little different now with 3 brand new wideouts. Potentially a new quarterback if it ends up being Lamar Jackson in some way. Just tons of brand new weapons. For me, it's hard to really hash out how he's going to be used and how he'll be used moving forward. So, I mean, it's totally a roll of the dice. Based on previous experience, I don't see him being much of an asset for the Ravens. That doesn't mean he can't be like a good tight end for the team, but I don't see him as particularly viable in DFS. But we would have to see it first. It would be a big-time roll of the dice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why it's a hold for me. I think we may see it. And I think we've seen a little bit of it so far in the preseason. Obviously, he had a touchdown in the Hall of Fame game last week. I didn't watch him yesterday, obviously. Don't need to watch Baltimore Ravens preseason games more than once a year. But yeah, I think, he is a guy who I'd keep an eye on as breaking out, but I wouldn't buy into any hype around him. If he's getting drafted more than Austin Hooper, that's silly to me. Austin Hooper, top 5 tight end. I'm not gonna.
Crazy. Was it all of the drugs that you did before this started, or just some of the drugs?
Just a possibility. I think it's more likely that Hooper's a top 10 tight end. That one actually I would bank on. I think that I would with some confidence. Top 5 is probably a bit of a reach. Probably.
Okay, because I was gonna say I'm ready to throw down a Chick-fil-A bet on Hooper top 5.
No. That's if everything breaks his way and that Falcons offense is super duper explosive, then maybe, but no. On to the Buffalo Bills. The relevant tight ends are Charles Clay and Nick O'Leary. Their new offensive coordinator, Brian DeBull, has a pedigree of tight ends. He's expected to heavily rely on them and running backs. Charles Clay was 9th in the league in target share last year, got 15.5% of the Bills' passes thrown his way at a fairly conservative 6.9 air yards per target. Nick O'Leary was used differently. He was targeted down the field more at far less of a rate than Clay, but at a Gronkowski level, 12.5 air yards per target. So they bring different dimensions. I think O'Leary's been banged up this preseason, so he won't be able to steal the role from Clay if that was even an opportunity. So Clay's going to get the targets. I just hate this offense, though. So I think even though Clay may have some value, I won't be the ones who unearth it, so I'm going to sell.
Yeah, on a per-possession basis, Clay was just barely below average for a tight end last year. I oddly like him, but he is not exciting. He's also going 22nd among tight ends in average draft position. So, again, we're at a person where if you want this person, if you want Charles Clay, you can probably pick him up after the draft is over off of waivers. I don't see any reason to buy. I would assume that a tight end with Taylor at quarterback is going to be a little bit better than with A.J. McCarron, but who knows? I'm obviously a Taylor guy, so this team sucks. I hate the Bills.
Oh, you're a Taylor guy, not an A.J. McCarron guy? You want to go out on that ledge?
Well, I thought Taylor got a raw deal last year. I don't know. There's something to be said for these efficient type guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, either Allen or McCarron throwing to him is not going to be an improvement. I guess the one thing would be the offense tends to veer more towards the tight end when you have an inexperienced quarterback because it is more of a check down place. And Clay obviously is going to be shorter routes than Kelvin Benjamin or whatever other bullshit they're running out at wide receiver. So I think that would be the argument for Clay, but not for me. Not for me. I think he can have usefulness, but I just don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of your world, Charles Clay.
Same.
Carolina Panthers, a relevant tight end is Greg Olson, and new offensive coordinator Norv Turner has been previously a very big proponent of tight end involvement. His last full coordinator year, or majority coordinator year, was in Minnesota, where he had Kyle Rudolph's career high 2016 season. Olson was limited by injury last year to only 7 games, but he did get a 12th ranked 5.4 targets per game. He was pretty bad with them, though. He only caught 7% of his targets. You could blame Olson, I guess, for that. Or if you're Kelvin Benjamin, you can blame Cam Newton. I think, the answer probably lies somewhere in between. I think Greg Olson might be washed up, honestly, after I watched these stats. He also didn't convert a single red zone touch into a touchdown last year. I'm selling. I think Olson's done.
Man, big Greg. I'm going to listen to the 7th Floor Crew after this. Pour one out for him. Going 5th overall among tight ends. And last year, among the 82 tight ends that I have listed in front of me, Greg Olson's DVOA ranked 73rd. That's per play, so him not being on the field for a lot of it, not relevant. This is just judging what he was out there for. You would expect him to recover a bit here. You would expect McCaffrey to be better. If DJ Moore can be better, that may open things up a bit more for Olson, but that's a really telling sign of how bad he was on a per-play basis last year. So there's absolutely no way I'm buying. I'm definitely not buying him as the 5th tight end coming off the board.
That's awesome.
So,
spot.
Yeah, that's a sell for me. I mean, I like Greg Olson more than I like Hooper, but
that's fair. The target share is bigger for Olson. Yeah, no, I think it's funny because I did remember you mentioning Olson a couple times, and in my head too, I was like, oh yeah, Olson's a good part. He'll be healthy this year. He'll be better. I didn't realize he was this bad, and I'm glad that the DVOA shakes out similarly because when I saw he only caught 45% of his balls, I was like, that's really bad for Greg Olson. So yeah, I just think the numbers seem to indicate he might be on the other side of his career, and if people are drafting him like he's vintage Greg Olson, I think that's a spot you really have to avoid.
How old is he? He's 33.
There are actually a couple of other 33-year-old tight ends who are having amazing years. So I mean, I don't want to say it's just an age thing, but Olson I don't know. He didn't look great last year either on watching games. So I think both those things combined. No thanks on Mr. Olson.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's just I think 5 is probably a little high. If things break well for the Panthers, he's obviously someone that is probably going to be a part of that. So I think that his upside is there because as the Panthers go, he's probably going to have a good season. Otherwise, it's not like he's going to lose the job or something. Been with the Panthers forever, so. I don't hate the idea of taking a quote unquote flyer on him, but that's a weird guy to take a flyer on that's 5th in tight ends. So
yeah, I agree. On to the Chicago Bears. Relevant tight ends are Trey Burton, Dion Sims, and Adam Shaheen. Trey Burton is the big acquisition coming over from the Super Bowl champs after obviously a noteworthy performance in their big game last year. Burton had a 74.2% catch rate last year, so he should be able to help out Mitch Trubisky a decent amount if he gets the amount of targets that he should get. The Bears are expected to run 2 tight ends out there a lot, and that is a spot where both Dion Sims and Adam Shaheen may have some value. Sims is more of a run blocking tight end, so he will be on the field a lot. He has a 51.7% catch rate, so that's not good. He shouldn't get much of an increased role there. Adam Shaheen, though, was amazing last year. He had an 86% catch rate and 3 touchdowns. So explosive, getting the ball in good spots. Obviously, he's probably a little bit too productive given the limited opportunity he had, just 14 targets last year. But I do think if you're doing 2 tight end sets, having Burton and Shaheen on the field really does open things up in a way where it wouldn't surprise me if Shaheen has some weeks of usefulness. I'm buying this group. I don't know if I'm buying Burton being a top 5 tight end because I just don't think he's going to get the volume. But there's something interesting about this group to me. I've bought a lot of Bears groups this year, but I'm going to keep buying them.
Trey Burton, 10th tight end coming off the board. He was 4th last year in DVOA among tight ends. And as you mentioned, Shaheen 11th in DVOA, obviously limited sample there. That sounds great. Both of those guys were incredibly efficient tight ends last year. Problem being, I think Mitch Trubisky is still dog shit. I feel really bad for Trey Burton. This is a bit of a style shift for him. But look, he was good. I expect him to be good again. He's not super relevant. I mean, he's the 96th overall player coming off an ADP right now. So if you'd like to take him if you're in a 10-team league, you'll be taking him somewhere in like the 9th to 10th round. Sure, I don't have an issue with that. So holding, I guess. I don't see a ton of upside because I don't believe in Trubisky.
Yeah, see, Germ says you must believe in Mitch, and he believes that Mitch is dog shit like you do, I guess. I don't know. I think Mitch – I don't believe in Mitch as much as I believe in Nagy and Eifert getting him into spots. Like, just based on what I've seen in the preseason and what I've read, I do like their ability to create offenses just to get him open windows to throw where he doesn't have to be as accurate. So, week to week, it might not be great, but against teams with beatable defenses, I think, there will be times where Mitch can kind of show some flashes just by having more open throwing windows. So that's what I'm banking on. Burton at top 10 might be a little high, but he does have upside. So I don't hate it. I think it's still a buy for me.
No, thank you. Hold for me. Like I'm not completely selling because of how good Burton was last year, and Trubisky is a much different quarterback.
Me and Bears Nation will take you holding. That's an improvement on all the other previous rounds, which were chock full of sells of the Bears. I like the Bears. So whatever. Cincinnati Bengals, onto them. The relevant tight ends in place are Tyler Eifert and Tyler Croft. Team Tyler fully in effect in Cincinnati. Tyler Eifert's health is always a question mark, but when he's seen the field, he's been super effective. But with Eifert's mostly sidelined last year, Tyler Croft got a 12.2% target share and converted 58.3% of his red zone touches to a score. If Eifert's healthy, he obviously should be even better. He is a better player than Croft, just an injury-riddled one. The release of Brandon LaFell, too, I think is also interesting. That's one that broke after we did our wide receiver video. Obviously, less targets for LaFell. I think there isn't anybody who's clearly going to steal all those targets. I think that does mean more opportunity for Eifert. And if Eifert misses, Croft proved that he was a pretty competent player, too. So I actually don't mind this group. I think there's some risk with the Bengals, just how bad that offense has been in general. But I think this is a buy teetering on a hold, but a very low-level buy for me.
Look, if Eifert's on the field, I certainly like him in a fantasy scenario. He's a guy that I would have in daily. If I had Dalton, I wouldn't have a problem streaming Eifert if I didn't get one of the main tight ends for the season. Croft was passable last year. I wouldn't mind using Croft if Eifert inevitably gets hurt. So again, it's a hold. Eifert's coming off the board 13th, 140th overall. So I mean, if you want him, you have the ability to get him pretty easily. It just doesn't seem like the spot. I mean, can you really trust him?
I don't think you can. I mean, that's really the concern there. We've seen the upside. I mean, he's had big years, but he just can't stay on the field. And, at 13th, I think that's a decent flyer to take. Like, I would rather take him at 13th than Olson at 5th. So I think in that respect.
Would I, because I generally stream unless I get Gronk at a value, or maybe like Kelce at a value. I've always been a guy that was probably streaming my tight end every week in a season-long scenario. So if I had Eifert to start, ride him till he's out, and then, start streaming after that.
I like getting undervalued guys who get targets. Like last year, I was all over Ertz, and that was one that made me happy. That was great, both DFS and from season long. I just knew he was so good the year before and didn't get as much of an opportunity week to week. So I think, in that respect, I do think Eifert is like a guy who's going lower than he should, who still gets targets. It's just the health is more of a factor there than it is for Ertz. And would it surprise you though if Eifert were in the top 5 at the end of the year, like given how many touchdowns he gets and the usage that the tight end gets for them?
But yeah, so that would surprise me.
Really? Okay, because I think he has such touchdown upside. I think that's sort of where, and also Croft was used so much in the red zone too. Like I don't know, I think he has a little more upside than it might seem. Just the injury risk is a pretty big drawback.
If he's a top 5 quarterback, then you're a top 5 tight end. You're probably a believer in the Bengals this year, which I guess in theory I am in their offense. But top 5 would be very surprising.
There is a bit of a running back tight end correlation I know in DFS, which I assume holds true then the season long. So I think Mixon. All signs are pointing towards Mixon being useful. I don't know. I don't know how strong that correlation is, but I do know I remember reading that initially when I first started playing DFS. That's one of them that has a positive correlation. That's kind of unexpected. Cleveland Browns. Let's do them. Relevant tight ends are David Njoku and Darren Fells. The Browns have stars on Hard Knocks this year, so we're going to see a little bit of them. Have not seen them talk about tight ends yet, so otherwise I would be very much probably on board with David Njoku because he would have one moment where he has a good joke, and obviously that correlates well with him being a viable player on the field. Njoku is an elite athlete. He gets down the field 10.6 air yards per target, but he only caught 53.3% of his catches last year. The hope is obviously having a more accurate quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, who does like to feed the tight end, as we talked about before, is going to help him out a lot. You saw Njoku get a touchdown last night with Baker Mayfield on the field. I think that Njoku actually has a pretty big opportunity in front of him. Fells, I think, is one risk for him. Fells is obviously a better blocker, more of a veteran tight end. I think there is a chance of him to take some snaps away from Njoku if they can't trust him in run blocking or pass protection. But I think Njoku is an elite athlete. I think I don't know his ADP offhand, but I think he might be worth a flyer athletically. I would say this is a buy for me, but it might be a hold. I don't know. Somewhere in between, though.
Njoku is the 14th tight end off the board, one spot behind Tyler Eifert. He was 54th in tight end DVOA last year. Not great. He's going to the Browns, which is not great. Or not going to the Browns, but he's got Tyrod Taylor here, but they are the Browns, so not great is what I was trying to go with there. No, I'm certainly not buying him. I'm not buying anything that the Browns are selling, that's for sure.
Yeah. Taylor Seiger, they looked like they loved Njoku last night. They were targeting him a lot from what I saw in the highlights. I do think you're right, though, that the catch rate, to me, that seems to be the big correlation between the DVOA and what I'm seeing is the catch rate. That's a really bad catch rate. But, I mean, if you have bad QBs throwing it, I don't know. Does DVOA account for a bad QB as well? I don't know that it does.
I mean, he had 4 touchdowns last year. That's more than, most tight ends. That's more than your boy Hooper.
Yeah.
You're right. Is it going to get better than that? Because that seems like it's not going to. But I like Tyrod Taylor. I don't think that the Browns' offense is any good.
I think the Browns' offense is going to be better for sure.
It's not going to be worse.
It could be worse. Yeah.
what a hot take.
No, but I mean, having Landry there again. We talked about Josh Gordon. Callaway's looked good in limited time as well. Good enough to get rid of Corey Coleman. I think the offense is going to be better, and I think Njoku can kind of rise with that tide. I think I'm closer to a buy than a sell, and I think at that draft position he does have upside and can get you touchdowns. He kind of strikes me though as like an Eric Ebron type who's never going to fully be what you hope he's going to be, but he can give you enough to be useful, I think is how I would file him away.
I just have a hard time buying a tight end that I could pick up off the waiver wire after the draft.
Yeah, also true. Let's try to go faster because I feel like now that we know it's short, I feel like now we're luxuriating too much of each set.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balance. Dallas Cowboys, relevant tight ends. Jeff Swaim, Blake Jarwin, Rico Gathers, Dalton Schultz. Jason Witten's retirement frees up 87 targets, which was 8th most in the league for the tight end position. Jeff Swaim is currently the favorite to start in camp, but he hasn't really had an opportunity to show much in his limited chances catching the ball so far. Blake Jarwin is reportedly the better receiver, but his blocking may be a liability, which is an issue for a run-heavy team like Dallas. And rookie Dalton Schultz has apparently looked green in camp and may not be ready to win the role. If Swaim actually does take the role and gets even half of Witten's targets, I think that makes him worth a lot more than a player of his status and athletic pedigree would deserve. It's possible that Jarwin or Schultz take some of those touches away or take some of those pass snaps away, especially Jarwin, I think, right now. So I think it's something you have to watch. I think this is a sell.
You're lucky you said it. It's an absolute sell. No one's taking Jarwin. No one's taking Swaim. No one's taking any of these guys. There's no reason to. I think we've talked about them enough. You're not drafting any of these guys in a league unless you're in like an NFC East only fantasy league or something stupid.
It wouldn't surprise me for one of them to break out. If like one of them can take the role, I think there is value in that offense. But it's unclear who it is, and none of them are super duper talented. And Rico Gathers actually might get cut after being the hype boy for the last few years of the Cowboys kind of press cycle.
I'd rather take Hank Gathers as their tight end this year.
I'd rather take Uncle Rico. Fucking Cowboys.
What, is he throwing footballs over mountains?
Exactly. That's, you know what, Alan Hearns, though, still looking great, as we mentioned last week, so don't forget that. Denver Broncos relevant tight ends are Jeff Heuerman and Jake Butt. New Broncos QB is Case Keenum. He targeted his tight end Kyle Rudolph 15.4% of the time last year. It's obviously going to be a different offense, but Keenum's accuracy-minded approach does convert well to tight ends. Virgil Green's out of town, and neither he nor Jeff Heuerman last year were targeted with a ton of the tight end snaps. But again, it's hopeful that that'll change with the QB switch. Heuerman's missed a lot of training camp, and he was expected to be the starter, but he's kind of losing his foothold on the position now. If somebody is going to take the role, it's likely going to be Jake Butt due to his ability in the passing game. I could see having some interest in Butt, which I agree. I still can see having some interest in Butt. I think if he gets the snaps to be useful, he might actually do something with them. He's a big body. He can catch the ball. I think he could be a helpful complement to Thomas and Sanders. But for now, no pun intended on that long butt, I'm going to sell the group of tight ends for Denver.
You're not buying any butt?
I'm not buying any butt. Only free butt for me.
I bought butt once or twice. No one's buying butt. 24th tight end. Not even ranked on some sites. I love that Butt is a tight end. The irony there is fantastic. But, and I don't mean that in a joking way, I mean, there's no reason to buy this here. I mean, if you're a really big believer in Case Keenum, I guess, you could probably get excited. Kyle Rudolph was solid for Minnesota last year, but there's no reason to get it. Again, this is another team with useless tight ends that are at best streaming available guys during bye weeks. Otherwise, you're not grabbing these guys. You're not even trying to research them.
Yeah, I think Butt can have some usefulness if he does take the role. Like I just think he's got kind of the prototype of whatever. But I think it's a position that's based on size, and when you see big butts, you cannot lie.
No, you can't.
Sorry. And so, how often do we get a guy named Butt? You just don't. You just don't. Detroit Lions. This is actually, I'm going to say right now before we get into it, relevant tight end is Luke Wilson. This is going to be the steal of the draft at tight end. Eric Ebron's departure to Indianapolis frees up 86 targets, 10th most in the league at the position. This means an immediate path to relevancy for Luke Wilson, a player who's caught 68.2% of his targets compared to 61.6% for Eric Ebron. They were both targeted in the same air yards per target range, 7 air yards per target. Wilson also converted red zone touches a little better. 20% of the time he turned a red zone catch into a touchdown versus 16.7% for Ebron. Basically, Wilson to me looks like a better version of Eric Ebron, a more reliable one. I think he could end up being a bit of a PPR play and actually having touchdown upside. So I like Luke Wilson. I don't know. I feel the draft might be strong, but he's probably my one of my top 5 under the radar tight ends right now. I mean, top 3 for sure. Sorry.
What kind of preposterous league are you playing in if Luke Wilson can be the steal of the draft?
At tight end.
A tight end that's going 229th overall. What does he
Where
have?
is he amongst tight ends?
34th.
Steal a draft at tight end though. That's like the steal of the draft at tight end. To be clear,
there's no draft. He's not draftable.
He's very draftable.
It's not a steal if you pick him up on waivers in week 4.
Get him for $1 in your auction, and then take a trip to the money bank.
Don't waste your roster spot. Wilson, 27th in DVOA last year. Ebron, for the reference, 33rd. So as long as he's getting volume, he'll be there. But this is a DFS only play. You're not rostering him in season long.
86 targets. Like that. I mean, I don't know. You're getting a better player taking over the targets. Like, to me, that's the thing, and that's the spot you want to target. Pardon the pun. But haha. But no, like I think you had a better player in a spot where with a quarterback like Matt Stafford. I just think there's a lot more opportunity for him there. And you're talking about relative to his ownership or whatever his draft position is. You're a guy who could be a top 10 tight end, and Ebron was a top 10 tight end last year. You're getting him for super duper cheap, next to nothing. I think that's steal territory.
It's not next to nothing. It's literally nothing. He's not.
Yes.
He's not draftable. 0% chance to draft him as of right now.
Oh, Geis tore his ACL. I didn't see that.
Really?
Oh, that's a downer.
Well, that's a kick in the dong.
Oh man, we liked him a lot too. That sucks.
Yeah, him being the running back for my favorite team and all. Oh no, MCL sprain.
Oh, that's 6 weeks.
Ian Rappaport said tore his ACL 2 minutes ago. But he also said sprained MCL 3 hours ago. So I think that the update, he's getting an MRI tomorrow, maybe today, but I think he's done. Washington Post, torn ACL out for the season. Fucking fuck.
You know who's going to have a better year than Darius Geis? Luke Wilson.
Barely.
No, I'm telling you, keep an eye on Luke Wilson. Luke Wilson's a buy for me. He's apparently a sell for Josh. I think buy him, get him super cheap in your draft.
You're the only person buying him on the planet.
That's what this video is for. I've been researching like a fucking beautiful mind every day, trying to find these guys who are going to be useful. And I think a lot of them more are popping up at tight end than I expected. Luke Wilson, bye-bye.
Yeah. Let's go bye on this nonsense that we're talking about right now.
Controversial point I'll go with, actually. I would take Luke Wilson over this next tight end. Green Bay Packers, relevant tight end.
Yeah. We got to stop the video if you're serious. We have to.
I'm dead serious.
No one can take this seriously.
Value relative. Okay, Graham last year was targeted 17.3% of the time, which was 8th in the league. He only caught 59.4% of those. He also got 1.63 red zone targets per game, which were the most at tight end, one of the most for any receivers at all. He turned those touches into touchdowns 38.5% of the time. So he got 10 red zone touchdowns. All of his touchdowns for the year were red zone touchdowns. He's not in Seattle anymore. It's with Aaron Rodgers, who likes to distribute the ball far more. Jimmy Graham is going as a top 5 tight end right now. He was number 1 a lot of stats last year. He will not be anywhere close to that this year. He might still be a good play, but again, you're paying a lot more for him than you are Luke Wilson. So I'm going to sell Jimmy Graham. There's no value in him. He's going to be worse. He's going to be substantially worse this year.
Jimmy Graham, the 4th tight end off the board, but let's go grab that waiver wire flotsam instead.
Yeah.
Graham, 10 TDs last year. Wasn't the best from a DVOA perspective, but I feel like Aaron Rodgers is going to be a shot of life for him. Not that, he never really clicked with Russell Wilson, which was disappointing. I thought that pickup for them when they got Graham, 2 years ago or whatever, I thought that was going to be like a major turning point for them. And he just didn't work out as like a pass catcher, but he is still nasty in the go zone. I fully expect Rodgers to love finding him anytime they're inside the 20. Rodgers throws one of the better deep balls or go up and get it type balls in the league. And Graham is probably one of the best tight ends in football at going up and getting it. So I'm definitely buying Jimmy Graham. 56th overall coming off the board. I would happily take him in the 5th to 6th round area.
See, to me, I would much rather, like, if you're going to take a tight end high, I'd rather go with, like, one of the higher value guys, like the Gronkowski, Ertz, Kelce guys. Like, I think Graham is being taken in that range, and I just don't see it for him. I'd rather go with one of the sure guys or go down way more to the Luke Wilson, Austin Hooper tier guys and hope for the best from them, because I just don't see it. He's not going to get anywhere close to what he got last year. It's not going to happen. Rodgers distributes the ball far much more. Like, fucking remember all the Joey Kuhn touchdowns. Like, it's not a spot where it's a for sure thing that he's going to get the targets in the red zone. Whereas, like, on Seattle, nobody was tall, so he got all the targets in the red zone.
All right. Do you think the Packers' offense is good?
I do. I mean, that's been the one thing I would say that has been consistent throughout. I think they're good in a couple spots.
If Rodgers is healthy, are they a top 5 offense in the league?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, then that's why you take Jimmy Graham.
But I mean, that's also why you take Devontae Adams. It's also why you take Randall Cobb. Like, I don't know. Like, I think.
Yeah, you should be taking all of those guys.
But I think he's a cog in the machine who's not going to be as important of a cog. And he's being drafted like he's still the most important cog, like he was last year. And that, to me, is like where the inefficiency is.
Dude, he caught more touchdowns last year at tight end than anybody else in the league. Why are we acting like that's crazy?
In a different offense.
In a worse offense.
I mean,
for him personally, he's getting a better pass-throwing quarterback this year. I don't care that Russell Wilson led the league in fantasy points last year. He's getting a better quarterback and a better offense.
I think you're taking the fool's gold here. I think a lot of people are doing that. But hey, some people like to chalk. That's fine. I just don't think Jimmy Graham is it. Like, I just think you're getting a guy at a worse price than he should be, and that's all. Like, I agree. Like, Rodgers is better, but Rodgers distributes the ball more. He'll throw as like he won't throw as many touchdowns, but like to the equivalent of like Richard Rodgers. Like, that guy will throw as many touchdowns to as he does Jimmy Graham, and that's sort of the quarterback he is. He's agnostic. He doesn't try to feed guys. So I think that's sort of, and I think Adams is a more dynamic red zone target.
Rodgers 15th in DVOA last year, so we're getting a better version of that.
Look, I think he'll be a top 10 tight end. He just won't be a top 5.
I love getting Graham here.
Oof. Agree to disagree. On to the Houston Texans. Relevant tight ends here are Ryan Griffin, Jordan Akins as well. Ryan Griffin's come into camp as starter. He grades out as more of a receiving tight end than a blocking one, so that's a benefit. Griffin had 9.8 air yards per target last year. Not too great with a 50% catch rate. I think there's going to be some boom or bust for Griffin if he holds on to the starting role throughout the preseason. It's possible Akins takes him over. But, I think if Griffin gets 5 targets per game, which is what he should get between kind of what he got last year and CJ Fedorowicz got, 5 targets a game for Griffin could be useful, just not super exciting. A hold for me, teetering on a sell, but I think he's okay. I think he's just like bleh. He's okay.
Ryan Griffin going 35th among tight ends. He was bad last year via DVOA. There's nothing really to be interested in here. You're certainly not buying any of these. You're not drafting any of these guys. Maybe you can take them in a week that you're taking Deshaun Watson in a DFS perspective, but there's nothing here from a tight end perspective here. I don't know why I said here so many times, but I've noticed that I said it like 3 or 4 times in that sentence. Just don't take these tight ends, people. That's it. Period.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you're going to take a tight end that low, Luke Wilson's right there. Right there for you. Top 10 tight end.
They're right there in that not getting taken at all range.
I just don't think people dig deep enough on tight ends, to be honest. That's what I'll say. And I don't think there hasn't been enough research out there. Like, I was blown away. I read so many things, and I was blown away by some of this tight end stuff where, like, nobody talks about tight ends.
Do you know why?
Because they're so crucial that people can't wrap their heads around it.
They're the exact opposite of that, actually. Worthless.
That's false. On to the Colts. Relevant tight ends are Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle. As mentioned above for the Lions. Ebron is a competent, not spectacular, 61.6% catch rate, and that's coming from a similar QB to Andrew Luck and Matt Stafford. So I'd think that that looks okay for Eric Ebron. But Jack Doyle was such a huge part of that Colts offense last year. Granted, it's going to be a different head coach this year, different offensive look. But Doyle was the 3rd most targeted tight end last year with 22.2% of his team's targets. and he had a very respectable 74.1% catch rate. So I think, Ebron is bringing a different dimension to the offense, at least theoretically, than Doyle. But Doyle's a more reliable guy. I think they're going to eat into each other's usage. Without talking about ADP, I don't think either guy has a ton of value because of that. So I probably am going to sell just because of this two-headed monster approach.
Do you have their targets in front of you from last year, Ebron and Doyle, by any chance?
Yeah, I can pull them up. Doyle had 108. And
Ebron at 86.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, so that's what? 194 targets combined between the two of them?
Yep.
Yeah, they both combined had less touchdowns than Jimmy Graham last year. Doyle going 12th overall, 12th at tight end, 128 overall. Ebron is going 21st overall at tight end. Damn, 21st at tight end, 189 overall. Man, it's scary. Like, they were both passable in DVOA, relatively close to average. I'd love to have one of them. I almost, it's not that I hope somebody gets injured, but having luck at quarterback, I think, makes one of these guys probably feasible. It's just really hard to make a choice now. I mean, I guess people are making the choice of Doyle. But if either one of these guys went down, I think that having the other immediately becomes like an interesting play. And I would expect to want to use these guys in a DFS perspective if I had lineups with Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I think they're going to be more useful on a week-to-week basis, I think, depending upon matchup. Also, one thing to note, Doyle just was catching the ball basically at the line of scrimmage, 4.9 air yards per target, which is pretty low for a guy getting that many balls thrown his way. An interesting usage for a tight end. But yeah, I agree. There's not going to get that many targets. Also, Jimmy Graham, by the way. So you think it's more likely that Jimmy Graham puts up 10 red zone touchdowns in 96 targets again than you do that? I think you're pointing. You take a lot of straw man arguments today with Jimmy Graham.
No, I'm not equating anything. I'm just saying Jimmy Graham was really good from a fantasy perspective last year, and now you're trying to take someone that's undrafted ahead of him. Two tight ends that played the entire season and had a ton of targets did not equate to Jimmy Graham's amount of touchdowns last year. And now he's got Aaron Rodgers. So this has nothing to do with Ebron or Doyle. I just noticed how large their target numbers were in comparison. And then I noticed that their touchdown numbers were there. I like these guys. I think that Ebron and Doyle could win you a milli maker. They're the types of guys that could get would it shock you if Ebron caught 3 TDs in week 7?
No, or Doyle getting 10 catches or something and being a bit off something.
Yeah. I like these guys more in a DFS perspective than I do in the season-long format.
I would agree with that. Houston's tight end, I don't know if Houston's starting tight end retired. I don't know if you're pointing that out, Taylor, as something we missed, but obviously that's the case. CJ Fedorowicz retired because of concussions, but he didn't get a ton of targets last year anyway, so it really doesn't matter much. Boom, boom, boom. On to the Jaguars. Relevant tight end, a guy we talked about a few times. I think Josh has kind of hyped him up a little. Austin Ferry and Jenkins joining town. Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns are gone, which may be a blessing for Austin Ferry and Jenkins because he got used to a relatively high usage role last year with the Jets, a 14.5% target share, which he paid off the 67%, 0.6% catch rate. They're not a high volume passing offense with Blake Bortles at the helm, but Ferry and Jenkins getting the departed Mercedes Lewis's red zone role, I think, could have some value. Obviously, taking some of those targets that Hurns and Robinson leave behind can help him out even more. I don't think Safarian Jenkins is an elite play, but I think he's good enough. He's probably in the second tier of tight ends, and I would buy him in that second tier, but I would sell him as anything more than that.
Austin Safarian Jenkins, 16th in tight ends, 163rd overall, so not really draftable. I don't like even talking about this. I was a big fan of his coming out of college. I thought that he was going to be incredibly good. And it's possible that we're just looking at this and thinking, well, the Jets are dog shit. Maybe that's why you were dog shit. But oh boy, was he dog shit last year, and I had no real idea. 71st in DVOA, negative 23%. He was dead last in DR among all of the tight ends that are in my list at 82 different people. It has to get better here because the Jags are certainly better than the Jets. But I am not buying Safarian Jenkins, even though I bought him, I think, in every other video about the Jags for the past month. I did not realize how bad he was on a per play basis. I can't, in good conscience, buy him anymore.
Huh. All right. Oh, look, I'm glad. This is why we do these videos. We learn along the way as we go, and you kind of have these preconceptions coming in. I'm with you. I think he was a volume play last year, and you notice that when you go through this process, like which guys were volume plays and which guys were actually good. I think he might be, to me, he might look a little better than his DVOA does, because I think the catch rate is pretty in line with guys who are I would define as okay, but not a lot of yards after the catch, not doing a ton in the red zone. I think he's okay. I just don't think it's going to be much better for him this year in Jacksonville. So, yeah, I think that's why 16. Sure, why not? He's okay.
Breaking news from my wife: Bethany Frankel's boyfriend died.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. My phone vibrated. All right, let's talk about a real tight end for once.
Or we could talk about the housewife. Is she housewife? I don't even know.
Yes.
I think she's housewife.
Jersey housewife.
Okay. Kansas City Chiefs.
No, not Jersey, New York. Sorry. Keep going.
Big difference between the two.
Same place.
Actually, there is sort of, I think, stylistically. The Chiefs' relevant tight ends, Travis Kelce. We talked a lot about Pat Mahomes so far, talked about the offense improvements. Pat Mahomes is going to air it out more recklessly, but nobody was more of a fan of Alex Smith than Travis Kelce. Kelce posted wide receiver caliber numbers in his 15 games last year. He picked up 1,038 yards. 22.5% target share, 1.4 red zone targets a game, and 8 touchdowns in total. Nobody's going to get the volume Kelce does in the league. The offense is still going to be the same, even if Mahomes doesn't check down to Kelce quite as much as Smith does. Not that Kelce rather is a check down option, but he does get that kind of safety with Smith a little more than Mahomes will probably take it. I still like Kelce a lot, though. I think maybe having Watkins in town will take some targets away from him, but I don't think it's going to be enough to matter. Kelce is one of my top players on the board at tight end, and I would buy him.
Yeah, he was fantastic statistically last year. He's second tight end off the board, 27th overall. I'm selling Kelce, but I don't mean that in like a way that I don't like him. I see a little bit more regression coming off of Mahomes. He obviously had a very good rapport with Alex Smith. Could see some growing pains this year. Watkins definitely doesn't help matters. So I don't think that I would be taking Kelce in like the 27th overall spot. That would probably be a pass for me. But he's, by all accounts, he should have a very productive year at tight end.
Yeah, I agree. I think, a little overdrafted, but, still, I think the opportunity is there. And if you think that Chiefs offense is going to be as explosive as I do, then I think that alone would make the case for Kelce. But lots of mouths to feed. This is a halfway point, so we'll speed it up a little bit. Los Angeles Chargers, new signing is Virgil Green. He's filling in for the departed legend Antonio Gates and the ACL torn Hunter Henry. Henry and Gates leaving frees up 114 targets, which is a big opportunity for Green, more than he's ever had. Mostly revered for his blocking ability, but he did have a good catch rate last year, 9.2 air yards per target in Denver, 64% catch rate. I think Green could be a sneaky big play, at least on a volume basis. There's been reports about him and Phillip Rivers working on their chemistry a lot, taking private practice sessions, maybe jogs on the beach, a little romantic sensual massage. I don't know. I'm buying Virgil Green. I think he's probably going to be very low on ADP as well. And I hope he is. And I think if he is,
you're out here buying scratch-off tickets, man. Virgil Green, 43rd tight end coming off the board via ADP. That is 349th. You might as well start taking offensive linemen that might catch batted balls at this point. Virgil Green was fine last year.
Targets.
1% DVOA was 36, so he performed at like an average basis last year. But again, this is simply a DFS play at best. He is not rosterable in season long.
See, I don't know. I think when you leave,
can we get in a league together? How many shitty tight ends are you planning on drafting?
I know it's going to be whoever. I do an auction, so it's going to be whoever's available who fits. I mean, granted, this year I might like a few too many tight ends. But
you can't run a free tight end set in fantasy and make that viable.
Okay, but the number to me is all that matters. So, like, if you think about it in the way of like the offense is just a flowing machine, 114 targets from that machine are gone. So, let's say Virgil Green doesn't get 114 targets. Let's say he gets 50% of that. that would still put him in the upper echelon of targeted players. And I think when you're looking at a guy relative to value, like, if he could get 50% to, 90% of those targets, that's a lot of targets. That amount of targets would put him in the top 10 for targeted players. And, it doesn't matter. It's just the volume. It's just a volume play. So I think that's why I would like him, is that there's nobody impeding him from getting that value.
I don't know how to tell you how wrong you are without sounding like an absolute asshole, but you're so wrong, it's ridiculous.
I mean, I don't think so, because I think the offense.
Everyone thinks so. He's not being drafted in these leagues at all. He's an afterthought at best.
Okay, Josh.
They're undraftable people.
I mean, they're not undraftable though, because because the public isn't doing something, that means that a player, that makes no sense.
It's literally the wisdom of the crowds.
I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that's the case in drafting tight ends in particular. I would absolutely say that. I think tight ends are one of the people's positions that are the dumbest approach always. It's just take Gronk, take whatever, and then otherwise it's flotsam. But they are still parts of an offense, and Virgil Green is a key part of that offense, unequivocally a key part of that offense, both from a run blocking and a passing standpoint. I don't think he gets as many targets as Hunter Henry and Gates do, but you can still have value in that offense. That's the whole point. I don't know why your approach to this baffles me based on your approach to every other sport.
Well, how are we talking about this then? You don't have to draft these guys. You can pick them up on the waiver wire if you want to use them in week 1. You don't even have to put them on a sheet when you go up to the draft. They're probably not even ranked if you print out ESPN's rankings.
But we're buying or selling the opportunity, not and sort of their relative value. And to me, that's what it's about. If you get a guy at 30 who actually looks good, and a 30th tight end off the board who looks better than some of the guys going 10 to 15. Does Virgil Green have a bigger opportunity in front of him than Ferry and Jenkins? I think he does. I think but that doesn't mean I don't know. I just I think you're citing dumb money as being the reason why this guy's not good.
Oh, I'm citing tight end stats.
But it's not. You're not even citing stats. The stat is 114 targets. That's the stat.
Yeah, they went to good tight ends. There's a reason Hunter Henry and Antonio Gates got those things. He's now an also ran tight end that no one cares about.
Okay. Look, I mean, honestly, people saying this is bad, you haven't done months of research. So I'm sorry to tell you that. But this is the stuff you look at, and this is how you find an edge, is at a position that can get volume that nobody's thinking is going to get volume. And that's all it is. The offenses are all fungibly the same. And yeah, if you lose one tight end and then you replace him with another tight end, he's not going to get 100% of the share, but he's probably going to get 60 to 70% of the share. And that's how it works every single year across the league. As long as there's consistency in the group of coaches, it's always how it goes. It's baffling to me that people aren't then you're I don't know. It's baffling, but whatever. Agree to disagree. Los Angeles Rams. This is a guy who I'm not into, but he's a relevant tight end. Tyler Higbee. 8.7% target share. See, again, this is the difference. 8.7% target share, 10.7 air yards per target. He's okay. He's not going to get enough targets. So pass. That's a sell.
This is not the spot for me. I want all of Cooks. I want all of Kupp. I want all of Robert Woods. I don't necessarily need anything at tight end here. It's a sell for me. I like the team. Again, they're streamable type guys in a DFS perspective if you've got Goff, but they're not season-long options.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's just not going to be enough there. The point, though, to me is you're looking for guys who are going to get a shot there. And if you get a combination of a shot on a guy who is going into an offense where the tight ends relied on heavily and the guy's competent, it's a good play, and it's a better play than people realize. I don't care about you doing best ball, fucking dork. Don't cite that as relevant data. Josh's ADP is the same thing. That's not you doing best balls doesn't fucking matter. Miami Dolphins relevant tight ends Marquise Gray, AJ Derby, and rookie Mike Gesicki. Marquise Gray reports are saying is that he's a crucial part of the Dolphins offense this year, but he seems like he's just holding the job until the rookie Mike Gesicki is able to take it. Gesicki grades out pretty comparable to Vernon Davis via his Spark scores, and I think that's something which is noteworthy for the future. Probably not something that's going to be super relevant coming up, given this offense. I'm not a big Tannehill believer. I don't think that Gesicki's got a clear path to the role. I'm selling the group, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on Gesicki later in the year and in the future.
Gesicki, 20th tight end overall, 174 total. I don't have enough to say about it. I'm not a huge Tannehill believer. I think that Landry not being there isn't exactly going to help matters from an offense perspective, but I'm not really buying the Dolphins offense, so I'm going to have a hard time buying any tight end for the team because I don't think they're a particularly vibrant offense. If there's less scoring, tight ends are essentially worthless. I mean, really, if you're not scoring touchdowns at tight end, you're not viable.
Yeah, I think he has the explosiveness to turn some offense around, and also he's a pretty big guy. I mean, again, he's built similarly to Vernon Davis in addition to the athleticism, so I think he could be a red zone target, which they do need. But yeah, it's probably not this year. So that's, yeah, I'm with you.
Like, he could be fine. I don't know enough about him, and I don't trust the Dolphins to want to learn more.
That's fair. Minnesota Vikings relevant tight end is Kyle Rudolph. New Vikings QB Kirk Cousins has shown the tight end position a lot of love in his Washington days. No reason to see anything different. Kyle Rudolph, who was the owner of a 15.4% target share in Minnesota last year. Rudolph is about as reliable as he can be with 70.4% catch rate. He turns his one red zone target per game into a touchdown. 37.5% of the time he gets a catch. So Rudolph looks strong. I think he's going to be a beneficiary of Kirk Cousins distributing the ball a little more agnostically and maybe not targeting Thielen quite as much this year as we talked about before. So I like Rudolph. I think he's a down the line play a little bit, but still, in range, can be valuable week to week and pretty safe, I think. So Kyle Rudolph would be a buy.
Yeah, super high floor here. He's the 8th tight end off the board, 73rd overall. He's not a guy that you get super excited about, but he's good. 24th in DVOA last year, but that's in a ton of volume that generally falls. He was 9th overall in DER. He's just a really good tight end. Cousins obviously enjoyed throwing to Vernon Davis and to Jordan Reed. Big fan of the tight end play, so I assume that he'll love throwing to Rudolph. I would buy Rudolph. I wouldn't want to splurge on him or get him early or anything. He's like a really reliable dude to have out there.
Yeah, I agree. He's not super exciting, not as exciting as the Luke Wilsons of the world, but he's certainly a player who's in mind. Can I play in your season-long league Spags? No, you probably wouldn't want to because I've won it 3 out of 4 years because I think about this differently and actually do research and don't just walk into chats acting like I know things. That's part of my process, looking things up and using data. New England Patriots relevant tight end is Rob Gronkowski. Gronk was sort of the bane of the fantasy community last year. But despite that, he played 16 games. His usage was still pretty strong, a 17.9% target share, which put him at 6th in the position. And his 12.2 air yards per target and 1.57 red zone targets per game would be good for 1st and 2nd amongst tight ends, respectively. Gronk's not the week-to-week kind of explosive play that he has been in the past, but I think, with Amendola gone, Edelman suspended, Cook's gone, I think there is an opportunity for him to be more of that this year. Still not sure about buying him, I guess, relative to the value, given his injury history and all that, but I think he looks good, so I think it would still be a buy.
Obviously the first tight end off the board, 24th overall. He was number 1 in DER last year by a friggin' mile. Almost more DER last year than Travis Kelce and Hunter Henry combined. They were at 2 and 3. He was also 3rd in DVOA, so it's not just about the volume. Every single play, he is just incredible. As long as he is planning to be on the field, you're absolutely buying all parts of Gronk. And really, when push comes to shove, as long as I have him healthy for my playoffs, I don't care what happens during the regular season. I would happily stream tight ends for 14 weeks if I knew that I got Gronk in 15 and 16.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to look at it. And, again, he just has the highest upside of anybody around. And, I think it's worthwhile to compare these guys to wide receivers sometimes. And Gronk is one of those guys who I think can put up wide receiver numbers at the tight end position. And I think that's sort of where his value is. So, and especially with a bit of a power vacuum in the Patriots' whole roster there with all the wide receiver changeover, I think that's a time where Brady will look to the guys he knows. And obviously Gronk is the guy he knows the best. New Orleans Saints, relevant tight end is the returning Benjamin Watson. Watson returns to New Orleans after a year in which he was somehow effective despite the Ravens' dreadful passing attack. Watson caught 77.2% of the passes thrown his way and also got 1.44 red zone targets a game. His target share is going to go down in New Orleans, but his catching ability and also combined with Drew Brees being the leading receiver, or excuse me, leading quarterback in terms of accuracy, I think it's possible that Watson is equally as at least his competent in terms of his opportunity there. It's crazy to me that Watson's 37, but he's probably as relevant fantasy-wise as he's been in a while. I think he's a fine play. I think he's still, the age is a concern, the target share is a concern, but I think he should be in the mix for streaming at least in DFS.
So DFS perspective, absolutely. He's someone you'll look at just because Drew Brees is going to be a relatively popular option every week. In season long, not interested. 29th tight end coming off the board. He was below average last year in terms of DVOA. So not a ton to like there, but he is going to an incredible offense helmed by Drew Brees. So I would like him in a DFS perspective. I wouldn't touch him in a season-long league. Maybe during bye weeks, especially if you do have Drew Brees, he'd be worth a stream, but he's not someone you keep on your roster.
He was really good last year, like really, really good in a way that I was surprised by. He got a lot of red zone targets, and he also had almost 9 targets a game. That blew my mind to learn about. He had not a full season for Ben Watson, but I don't know. He seems like he still has it despite the advanced age. So I think that's the one thing that keeps me a little curious about him. And he did have a big year in New Orleans before too. I don't know. Could be a little too slept on. Let's see. Let's go on to the Giants. The relevant tight end here, last year's rookie sensation, Evan Engram. Evan Engram proved his worth with Beckham on the sidelines for the majority of 2017. Picked up the fifth highest target share at 19% and 7.7 targets a game last year. His catch rate of 55.7% was not very good. But one would hope the defensive attention spread between Beckham and Sterling Shepard, as well as Saquon Barkley, will help get him a little better there. I would say it's likely you're going to see less targets for Engram with the return of Beckham, but a better red zone opportunity slate should be in front of him, I would think, and maybe that'll mitigate some of the damage. I think Ingram's a little overhyped, though, so I'd probably sell him based on that.
He is the 6th tight end off the board, 62nd overall. He's basically in a tie with Greg Olson. Engram was not the most efficient guy last year, 52nd in DVOA, but obviously the volume was there. I don't know if Barkley helps or hurts in this scenario. Does having a better weapon open things up for Engram, or does that just take opportunity away from him? I'm not buying because I'm not buying Eli Manning. It's just not an offense I want to be a part of. I can see this getting really ugly, especially if Beckham starts his pouting because Manning plays like shit for 2 weeks. I would not be buying Engram with a confidence level, but he should have the volume as a fantasy player to be rostered for most of the season. He just wouldn't be a priority to me. I think he has pretty big error bars.
He got a lot of volume last year. I mean, that's sort of the main thing, and that volume's just not going to be there at the same depth this year. Now that there actually are people, there are bodies on the field. The Manning part even taken out of the equation. So I think Manning's going to be better than I think you do. But yeah, I think Ingram's just he's an okay play. I just don't think that he's going to take a leap into the top echelon like a lot of people seem to think he will this year. He's a good player, but he's not.
As weird as it sounds, I could see him vulturing touchdowns in a way because people are so worried about where are Barkley and Beckham in a red zone scenario. So I could see him leaking at seam route type stuff and being found. If Eli can get him the ball, that'll be the key. Yeah,
I think that makes sense. The other New York team, the Jets, the relevant tight ends are Eric Tomlinson, Jordan Leggett, Clive Walford, and Chris Herndon, who somebody in the chat mentioned earlier. Eric Tomlinson's regarded as more of a blocking tight end, but he caught 73% of his targets last year. Herndon and Leggett are both in the mix and grade out more as true tight ends than Tomlinson, but neither is currently perceived as reliable enough to see the snaps that Tomlinson is getting. Clive Walford comes with a bit of a pedigree from Oakland. It's unclear if he's going to get a shot. It's unclear if he's going to even be on the team past preseason. So I think, to me, this is, I would say, pretty clearly a sell. There is obviously a role, though, left there with Ferry and Jenkins not there, given the amount of targets he got last year. So somebody could come out of this and have some value. It could be Herndon. Honestly, it might be Tomlinson, but nobody here is really getting me that excited unless there's a clear-cut starter, and it's one of the pass-catching guys. So it's a sell for me.
They could get rid of every tight end except for one on this team, and I still wouldn't want that person. I don't want anything that the Jets are putting out there. Leggett, the only Jets tight end that appears to be drafted, 52nd tight end overall. There's got to be a word that's more extreme than selling.
I mean, you could bankrupt it. You could liquidate it if you want.
yeah. He's just the Jets tight ends are bankrupt heading into this season.
Yeah, Herndon does get some hype. I mean, you can see that one guy coming in and caps locking about Herndon. So I think that there's some steam on him, but I think there are much more straightforward plays that are also under the radar than getting too excited about a guy who may not have that big of an opportunity in front of him. So I agree.
I just don't want it parts of the Jets.
You can maybe talk me into Robbie Anderson again, or one of their wide receivers. I like Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, those guys become functional because they're the number one wideout on a team, not a tight end on a trash squad.
Fair. Oakland Raiders relevant tight end Jared Cook. Cook was solid and unspectacular last year, mostly hampered by his red zone ineffectiveness. But he did get an opportunity overall. He had the 10th biggest target share with 15.4%, and his 9.1 air yards per target show that, and at least a chance to move the ball downfield and make plays. John Gruden's going to be a more run-heavy coach. Obviously, we've talked about that in every chapter so far. The theory is that more running would make more playmaking opportunity for Cook in the play-action game. I think Cook is better than you think, but still not as good as he could be. He's never lived up to that hype fully. His inability in the red zone to me is totally baffling, given how big he is, and he just terrible in the red zone. So it's a sell for me, but I think he's got more value than some of those guys in the mid tier.
Yeah, he's 19th in ADP, 187 overall. Last year, he was slightly above average in DVOA. You kind of know what you're getting with him at this point. He's streamable. You don't keep him on your roster unless you're in some crazy deep league. And he's a guy that'll probably pop up in DFS again if you're stacking with Derek Carr, but he's not a guy that you're looking to individually. He'll have a big game. He'll probably have 2 big games, and that'll probably be the extent of it.
Yeah, not a ton there. I think he'll give you, some solid weeks if you were streaming him. He'll give you 3 catches for 50 yards, and you'll be like, all right, sure. And that's probably all he's good for, but not much more than that.
I also don't trust Gruden, so.
Yeah, I don't either. Though I do think, if you were going to trust Gruden, it seems like the tight end would be a player that he would want to target more because that is a closer to the best option, which fits sort of his narrative so far. But still, Jared Cook is not that player anyway. Philadelphia Eagles relevant tight end is Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is one of the better options on the board after a 2017 campaign in which he was 4th in the league in target share with 19.5%, getting just under 8 targets a game. Ertz was 5th in red zone targets in the position and converted those into 8 red zone touchdowns, which would put him just behind the aforementioned Jimmy Graham last year. Carson Wentz expected to be back at full health. Ertz gets even less competition for the touches with Trey Burton gone. To me, Ertz looks like the best tight end on the board, actually. So I'm buying him big time.
Ertz, 3rd tight end off the board, 37th overall. Exceptional last year. Tied for 4th in DER. He was 20th in DVOA. So great combination of efficiency and bulk. There's no reason to suspect that anything would go any different now. I actually think that having Richard Rodgers will help him a little bit. He's functional. Maybe gets Ertz like a breather every now and again. Rodgers had the 15th highest DVOA. So, it's always good to have like an efficient backup. Ertz can swallow up all the volume. I love Ertz. I hate the Eagles with a raging passion, just as a personal stance. But you're not going to find many tight ends better than Ertz, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, and Ertz, I think, also one thing to point out, when he gets a catch in the red zone, he turns into a touchdown 47% of the time, which would put him pretty high up there amongst everybody else, even higher than Jimmy Graham. So despite all the touchdowns he had. Ertz, to me, has been a great play for a couple of years now. Last year he had the breakout. This year you're paying a premium for him, but I think he's as good as any of those other guys you're getting a pretty steep tax for. Pittsburgh Steelers, relevant tight ends are Vance McDonald and Jesse James. McDonald was expected to seize a key role after signing with the Steelers in the offseason. He has not been in training camp at all, just hurt a lot. So reportedly, Jesse James is kind of holding on to the spot more than expected. James didn't get a ton of targets relative to a lot of the other tight ends, only a 10.3% target share. Any loss of that to McDonald or the other backup, Xavier Grimble, would not be good for James. The James caught 68% of his balls last year, 0.75 red zones for targets per game. Tight end's never going to be a focus for the Steelers like it is, obviously, getting the ball Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Juju. But James is okay. I think a week-to-week play more so than an option you want to have rostered year-long. But he's all right to me. Probably a hold teetering on a sell just because he's not as good as the other guys.
McDonald, 26th tight end off the board. Jesse James, 36th. Neither was anything special last year. They're basically replacement level tight ends. You can slot anybody in there if you want to. So I'm definitely selling. There's no need to have these guys. Again, they're only rosterable in situations in DFS where you're stacking with Roethlisberger.
San Francisco 49ers relevant tight ends are George Kittle and Garrett Selleck. Kittle was hurt yesterday. Unclear who his injury is and how long it's going to keep him out. But if he can stay on the field, he was really good as a rookie, arguably as good as his much more hyped classmate Evan Ingram. Kittle caught 68.3% of his targets and also had the 6th most red zone targets per game. He also added value as a runner with 6.3 yards after the catch, which was tops amongst any relevant player at the position besides Vernon Davis. Garrett Selleck could see some usefulness behind Kittle, but it's really Kittle's shot if he can be healthy. I would buy Kittle if he's healthy. I would be not as into Selleck. More of a streaming option for Selleck if he's the guy who has to hold down the job with Kittle hurt, but would love to buy Kittle if he can stay healthy.
Kittle, 11th overall, or 11th at tight end, 116th overall. He was he had 16th in DR last year. He had a positive DVOA. This is the type of guy that I would take a flyer on. I think the upside is there with a full season of the handsome man, Jimmy G. This is the kind of guy that I would pick up late and hope that he could break into like a top 5 role if all things go perfectly. I don't necessarily see that for the Niners. I think they're a year away, but this is I can see him making that sort of move based on his numbers from last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's got more athleticism too than some of the other guys who I think are going a little under the radar. So I think that's also a big benefit to Kittle. And obviously, yeah, having Jimmy G at quarterback definitely helps as well. He's an accuracy-minded quarterback too, so he'll target tight ends a fair amount. And Kittle is explosive. And, that's the reason, too, Selleck could have value if Kittle misses time. Selleck is just going to kind of stand in a spot and catch it, but he can get, 4 or 5 catches here and there. So
Selleck was really efficient last year, so they've got a really nice 1-2 punch.
Yeah, they have guys who won't drop the ball when Jimmy throws it to them, and maybe if Kittle is playing, he can do something with it. So it's an interesting position. If Kerry Kittles is playing, he could definitely do something. Just deep balls all day. Seattle Seahawks up next. Relevant tight ends are rookie Will Dissly and Ed Dickson, who's a new signing. Will Dissly is the big hype here. He's been called special by coaches and teammates, including Russell Wilson. He has the size to take advantage of the 1.63 red zone targets a game that Graham left behind. He's probably not going to get the 10 touchdowns in the area, the much ballyhooed 10 touchdowns we've discussed that Graham did. But any big pickup of that would be great for a rookie who's sort of pre-hype. Ed Dickson seems equipped to pick up some of Graham's targets as well, or Luke Wilson's. He had a pretty okay, more passable than okay, 62.5% catch rate and 10.6 air yards per target. But Dissly is the guy here who I don't feel like people are talking about much. I think Dissly looks really good. I like all the media hype around him. I like, again, the role is what I'm looking for. What are you stepping into and how much of it can you fill? I think Dissly can fill a decent portion of what Graham did. And that's, to me, is why you would go to Will Dissly. So I'm buying.
Dissly not being drafted at all, not even listed in the average draft position rankings for tight ends among the 53 that are listed. Dickson, really good last year. 11th in DR, 16th in DVOA. Not exactly a touchdown monster, but just hyper efficient when he was doing things. I don't necessarily see him as fantasy viable outside of a streaming situation. Again, he's 41st in tight ends average draft position. So I'm buying them holistically as a tight end group for the Seahawks, but I'm not necessarily buying them in a fantasy standpoint. I wouldn't have any of them.
I'm surprised Dissly isn't getting drafted at all. Like, why is Hayden Hurst getting drafted top 20 and Dissly isn't getting drafted?
I have no idea. It appears that he's like the 3rd ranked tight end on the Seahawks.
But no, he's currently the starter. And in every depth chart that's out there. So that to me is like why I think that there is.
He's not the starter on the depth chart that we're sharing right now.
He's a starter on our lads and on the Seahawks. Maybe it's changed. I don't know, but obviously, look, if you search Will Dissly and look at all the headlines around him, it seems pretty clear they're building him up to be the starter rather. Even if he doesn't get a starter share initially, I think he's interesting. Again, it is sort of a flyer play, and which is where the value is. But I think I like a lot of the hype around him, and I like what I've seen. So keep an eye on Dissly then. Keep an eye on Gesicki. Keep an eye on Dissly. Got a couple left here now. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, relevant tight ends are Cameron Brate and OJ Howard. We discussed, obviously, Jameis Winston being unavailable for the first 3 games in the last couple chapters. Both Brate and OJ Howard are key parts of the offense. Brate got more volume with a 12.7% target share, almost double the targets of Howard. Howard's a more explosive option, and he catches the ball a little better, 67% catch rate on a deeper 11.9 air yards per target. Howard also converts his red zone touches into touchdowns more frequently, but Brate gets targeted more in the red zone. I think Brate's got a pretty good hold on the job, but you drafted Howard so high for a reason. He has to take more of the offense. So I think I would be more inclined to go Howard, but I think the timeshare option here is not the best for either guy. They'll have weeks of usefulness, but I think this is a sell for me just because I want to see one dude more than these two.
Yeah, so I'm buying them both from a football perspective. I don't necessarily know if I can buy them from a fantasy perspective. Brate last year tied for 4th in DR with Ertz. Howard was 7th, so lots and lots of volume to both guys. Let's see, Brate was 12th in DVOA. OJ Howard was 6th. I mean, these guys were absolutely incredible from a football perspective last year. Howard's going 15th at tight end. Brate is 17th. Like, you can't really take one with any sort of confidence, but they're both going to be good so long as they're on the field. I think they're more viable in a DFS perspective, so you can play the matchups. But I'd have a hard time having one of these guys on my roster because I would constantly be thinking, shit, is the other guy going to score today?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think they're different players, though. Like, Brate, to me, is more of a PPR kind of play guy, whereas, Howard is more of a deep threat and red zone target. So I think you're playing a touchdown game with Howard. You're playing the volume game with Brate.
Yeah, you're definitely taking Brate over Howard in a PPR league.
Yeah. I agree.
No choice there whatsoever.
But yeah, it's an interesting spot for them. It would just be nice. Again, another spot where it just would be nice to see a guy take the lead and take the full job.
I think they're just both really good. It's an odd embarrassment of riches with a team that has basically no riches.
Yeah. Also, so look at the Seahawks depth chart now on Our Lads, which is the one I've mostly been using. Also updated yesterday. Nick Vannett got bumped to number 1, even though he wasn't. I feel like this lineup has changed 3 times. It was at one point Dixon at the starter. Now it's not Dissly. Now it's Vannett.
Disley's third here, and Dissly was only ranked in 6 of the 100 experts on Fantasy Pros.
But seriously though, search Dissly. Not you, but if you're watching this, search Dissly. The hype to me seems to be going Dissly's way. Russell called him one of the stars of camp. Russell, we're on a first name basis. Russell Wilson called him one of the stars of camp. I don't get why Vannett would be at first on this depth chart. I don't get why Dixon would be towards the bottom now. I don't know what they're doing, but keep an eye on the position because I think there is opportunity there just because of the role of the tight end in that offense.
Pick him up in week 9 if he's playing well.
Pick him. Just store a roster spot for him. Have 5 tight ends. One of them will break out and be really elite. That's the hope. That's smart fantasy. It's not fun.
I feel like I'm having a show with Taco right now.
It's upsetting because I'm really good at fantasy football. I've won my league more than anybody else has over 11 years or whatever we've had it. But a lot of that is taking flyers on speculative guys. That's what I play with. That's how I play. Tennessee Titans, relevant tight ends are Delanie Walker and Jonnu Smith. New offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur, we talked a lot about. Again, did not feature the tight end heavily for his part in the Rams' 2017 offense. But the Titans were heavily relied on Delanie Walker last year. A 22.4% target share for him, which was second in the league at the position. Walker repaid the faith with a solid 67% catch rate, 9.7 air yards per target. Not much in the way of yards after the catch, but he's 33. What do you want from him? Jonnu Smith, you would think, is a more explosive option, kind of similar to the Brate-Howard dynamic in Tampa Bay. But his 60% catch rate and 7.4 air yards per target were not as valuable as Walker's part of the offense. So Jonnu, to me, not somebody I'm particularly excited about in year 2. Walker's getting up there in age. I think it's safe to question him continuing to operate at the same level. But Walker's a safety blanket. Mariota's going to need him. I think he's still an important part of enough part of the offense, and the wide receivers aren't so great that they needed to get the ball away from him. So a light buy for me here.
I'd probably buy him a little bit harder in a PPR league. He's the 7th tight end off the board right now, going 74th overall. Oddly enough, one spot behind Kyle Rudolph, which, I see them as like similar high floor guys. 111 targets last year for Walker, 3 touchdowns. I mean, you need his touchdown luck to get a little bit better. Hopefully, having Dion Lewis, who graded out very well from last year, hopefully Dion Lewis helps that offense, maybe opens things up a little bit more for Delanie Walker. I know he's not that style of back, but maybe just having more talent will open things up for a bigger tight end. I'm holding on Walker. Like, I would clearly take him in and around the spot that he's being drafted, but it's not like I'm going to do backflips over it. He's Delanie Walker.
Yeah, I agree with that. He seems like, I think he's saying he's a high floor play with maybe a little bit of upside, I think is about right. Like, if you want no risk, if you don't want to go to the Disleys of the world and the Luke Wilsons, then take Delanie Walker, because he's going to get a certain amount of targets. He's going to catch them, and he has at least a chance of getting a touchdown. But he really wasn't good in the red zone. So, Washington Redskins, final team of the day. Relevant tight ends are Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis. Alex Smith, as we discussed before, was the 3rd most accurate quarterback in the league last year. That included a heavy reliance on the tight end position. Travis Kelce and Jordan Reed, are they very different players? I don't know. Jordan Reed is about as good of a player at the position as you can get, but obviously he's been injured so many times, concussion, shoulder. He had a toe injury, which he got surgery for in the offseason. He's been mostly limited in practice so far in camp. The goal is to get him ready for the start of the year. His 5.8 targets per game would have him 9th in the league, and a 77% catch rate for him in a limited sample size of the games he played last year. It's as good as it gets in the league. If he's healthy and available, he's about as good of an option as you'll get. If he's not available, Vernon Davis is also about as good as it can get. Less targets per game with 4.3, but he got 10.7 air yards per target versus Reed's 6.4. And his yards after the catch is 7.1. It's still crazy. Just an elite athlete who can get out into space. So they offer different dynamics. Reed, though, is the guy you want to see healthy. Reed scored touchdowns on 50% of his red zone catches, and I think that's also pretty amazing. I want to believe in Reed in terms of the injured guys playing pool. I'd probably go ahead of Eifert with him, so I guess I'm buying Reed.
Reed, the 9th tight end off the board, 93rd overall. He was bad last year, negative 10% DVOA, below replacement level in terms of volume. If he's healthy, and he's healthy, you would expect him to be higher. I'm not a fan. I like Vernon Davis as a football player more. Jordan Reed is just sort of more entertaining for me. I mean, is the 9th or 10th round worth the flyer on Jordan Reed? I don't know. Probably. Because I think that Alex Smith is a better fit. But I wouldn't be excited about it. At the very least, he's going in a round where it won't kill you. So, in theory, I'm buying them. I like the combo much more from an actual football perspective than I do fantasy. On weeks that Jordan Reed is that he's healthy, he's going to be a very popular DFS option.
Yes. And I think Reed, I don't know that taking 2 tight ends is the strategy that you want to go with, but I think if you're taking a Reed or Eifert, I think backfilling them with one of the Virgil Green or Wilson type players who are going to have a guaranteed role in an offense that uses the tight end, I think would be how I would pair it. Get a guy with some sort of floor theoretically with one of those guys. But I like Reed a lot. I think I'm willing to bank on Reed. Brett Wojo asking, do you like Reed or Graham more?
Oh, Graham for sure. It's not even remotely close.
Relative to their draft positions, I would probably go Reed.
He's got to play. He's got to be on the field.
He does have to play. I like Jordan Reed. I've had Jordan Reed a lot in season long and DFS in the past. The injuries were very frustrating. But when he does play, he gets targets and he does convert them. So, I like Reed.
Yeah.
Just QB
definitely Graham for me. But on a week-to-week basis, absolutely positively, Reed is in play there.
Last question for Cody Leach. Do you guys draft tight ends early? So, I mean, I do an auction now. I wouldn't necessarily advocate for taking a tight end early, but I do think, I mean, one of Matthew Berry's things that he says a lot is it's about mitigating your risk each week in season long. So I think, if you can get a good tight end, if you get a Zach Ertz or a Kelce, and the price isn't terribly bad, like I don't know that I want to take those guys in the first round or even the front half of the second in a snake draft. But I think if you can lock down tight end and really get those targets and that red zone opportunity, I think there is value in that. So it's all relative to your league and the situations, but I wouldn't be opposed to taking a guy towards the bottom of the second, top of the third.
Yeah, depending on my draft position, I used to pop guys like, Jimmy Graham when he was with the Saints and when Gronk was first blowing up. Those were guys that I liked taking either late in the first as the if I was like at the wraparound. And a lot of that has to do with the replacement level of tight ends. Basically, for fantasy, if you're playing in like a standard scoring league, there's like 25 guys that have basically replacement level projections. So guys like Gronk and Graham at the time were projecting so far above that you were actually picking up a lot of value by doing it. This year, the way that it's set up, I would be surprised if I ended up with one of the the bigger tight ends early. It's just like nobody's really confident in Gronk on a week-to-week basis. Kelce's got question marks, but when it was Drew Brees and Jimmy Graham and Graham was like the guy, or Gronk was yet to be injured constantly, those were the guys that I liked having. Like I would get X running back at 9 and then take Gronk at 11 or 12 with the wraparound. I was always really happy with that. But if I wasn't paying all the way up for those guys, I was probably not even drafting a tight end.
Yeah, and I think Cody Leach, what you're saying, don't take one unless it's Gronk before round 10. I think that's not wrong. I mean, I would extend it past Gronk this year and include Kelce and Ertz, to be honest. But look, I think there are enough cheap flyer guys out there who are plugged into an offense that needs the tight end. So I do think that approach works, and I think Ertz last year was outside the top grouping, and he made the jump. I think you can find those guys. The guy we talked about, Kittle, seems like a guy who's in that range who can make a jump. Reed, if he's healthy, can make a jump into that range. So there is value deeper in it, even if you don't want to go to the guys that I'm farming for. I think that's enough. So this is the end of chapter 5. We've done the tight ends. Last up, we have the defenses, and then we go into the actual DFS season with some different content, some basics, some whatever, some actual projections and rankings, which will be available for premium members. If you get the all sport package now, you can get it. If you wait for the NFL early bird packages, those should be coming soon as well. But go sign up for something premium so you'll have all of the important rankings from the tiebreaker of Josh, in my opinions, Alex Osimo, who is the #1 DFS player in the world. So go sign up for that now. Be a part of it. If you don't want to get the whole sports package, just wait for the early bird NFL ones. But it'll all be good stuff. So thank you guys for watching. Any parting words, Josh?
No, join us in 2.5 hours as we go live for this Friday baseball slate. Like this video, that would be helpful as well. Pound that like button, pound that thumbs up if you enjoyed our little tight end banter today. But
a tight end struggle.
Yeah.
Look, I believe different things, and I think tight end is one spot that you can differentiate and actually dig deep and find people, and that's always been how I've approached it every year. I think there's safety in the top guys, but hey, tight ends, people don't care about them. I love you, Jake Butt.
I love that butt. Later, everybody.
Bye, guys.